The autumn leaves swirled softly outside the Grand Country Club in Charleston, South Carolina, but inside, the air was icy cold. Beneath the glittering crystal chandeliers, dozens of high society guests moved across the ballroom in tailored silk gowns and bespoke tuxedos. Standing near the entrance was 28-year-old Clara, holding the handles of a manual wheelchair. Sitting quietly in the chair was Elijah Vance, a 38-year-old black man wearing a neat, plain dark suit. His posture was calm, his eyes reflected deep wisdom, and his legs were covered by a simple wool blanket. Clara's former high school classmates, led by her wealthy ex-fiancé, Julian, stepped forward with drinks in hand. Julian's gaze swept over Elijah with undeniable condescension, a sneering smile playing on his lips. Without a shred of hesitation, Julian raised his glass and let out a sharp, mocking laugh that drew the attention of nearby guests. "Well, look at Clara," Julian said loudly, his voice cutting through the soft violin music. "From marrying the high school quarterback to pushing a broken-down charity case around. Did you marry him for his government disability check, or were you just desperate?" Snickers rippled through the circle of wealthy onlookers. Phones were raised as guests recorded Clara's face, expecting her to break down in shame or tears. But Clara didn't bow her head. She tightened her grip on the wheelchair handles, her eyes flashing with quiet, fierce devotion. Sitting in front of her, Elijah didn't flinch. He slowly adjusted his cuffs, looking at Julian with a tranquil, dignified pity that made Julian's smirk momentarily flicker. "My husband's strength, Julian," Clara spoke up, her voice steady and clear across the silent room, "is something a man like you could never comprehend, no matter how much money your father gave you." Julian scoffed, motioning to security. "Get this beggar and his nurse out of my charity gala before they ruin the aesthetic." To understand Elijah Vance, you must understand the tragic yet heroic journey of a man who turned bitter tragedy into an unshakable legacy. 10 years prior, Elijah was not sitting in a wheelchair. He was a brilliant structural engineer who had developed groundbreaking renewable energy patents. But during a devastating chemical plant fire in South Chicago, Elijah didn't run for safety. Hearing the screams of two trapped young technicians, he rushed back into the burning structure. He pulled both men to safety just seconds before a massive steel beam collapsed, crushing his lower spine and permanently stripping him of his ability to walk. The world saw a man in a wheelchair and made immediate, cruel assumptions. When Elijah met Clara 4 years later at a local community center where he quietly volunteered, she didn't see a disability. She saw a man of profound character, a brilliant mind, and unmatched kindness. Despite her family's intense pressure to marry someone from their wealthy social circle, Clara chose Elijah, marrying him in a quiet chapel with no grand fanfare. What Julian and the snobbish guests at the country club failed to realize was that Elijah never sought public applause for his bravery or his intellect. Following his recovery, he founded Vance Global Technologies, a massive infrastructure conglomerate that silently funded clean energy projects across 3 continents. Elijah preferred to live modestly, driving a simple adapted vehicle and wearing plain suits. But that evening, at the charity gala, Julian's arrogance was about to collide with a reality he was completely unprepared for. As security guards approached Elijah's wheelchair, the heavy oak doors of the country club swung wide open. A tall, distinguished gentleman stepped into the foyer, flanked by 3 senior executives in sharp suits. It was Arthur Sterling, the world-renowned venture capitalist and the primary financial sponsor of the entire Charleston Gala. Julian's eyes lit up instantly. Securing Arthur Sterling's investment for his failing real estate firm was the sole reason he had hosted the event. Forgetting about Elijah for a second, Julian rushed toward the entrance with an eager, practiced smile, extending his hand. "Mr. Sterling, welcome, sir. We are beyond honored to have you grace our evening." Arthur Sterling didn't extend his hand back. His eyes swept past Julian, locking on to the far corner of the ballroom where two security guards were standing over a man in a wheelchair. Arthur's face turned pale, his expression shifting from corporate composure to absolute shock and reverence. He pushed past Julian without a word, his rapid footsteps echoing off the hardwood floor as the crowd watched in silent confusion. "Elijah!" The entire room went dead silent. Julian stood frozen near the entrance, his arm still awkwardly extended, his jaw slightly open as he watched the billionaire, Arthur Sterling, drop to one knee right beside Elijah's wheelchair. "Mr. Sterling," Elijah said softly, a warm, genuine smile finally touching his face. "It has been a long time." Arthur reached out, taking Elijah's right hand in both of his own, his eyes brimming with tears in front of 200 wealthy, stunned onlookers. 10 years ago, Arthur turned to face the hushed crowd, his powerful voice ringing out clearly. A fire broke out at the Chicago Energy Facility. 2 young technicians were trapped beneath falling steel. One of those young men was my only son. Gasps echoed through the room. When everyone else fled, this man, Elijah Vance, walked into the flames. He carried my son out on his back. He sacrificed his own legs so my child could see tomorrow. Arthur stood up, turning his gaze toward Julian with a cold, piercing fury that made the younger man shrink back. Elijah Vance is not just a hero. He is the chief executive officer and majority shareholder of Vance Global. His company owns 80% of the land this country club sits on, and he is the lead investor funding my entire capital group. The atmosphere in the ballroom shattered completely. Julian's face drained of all color, his knees visibly shaking as the realization of his catastrophic mistake set in. The very guests who had been snickering seconds ago lowered their phones in utter shame, murmuring amongst themselves in shock. Julian stammered, taking a hesitant step forward. "Mr. Vance, Elijah, I had no idea. If I had known who you were—" "That is the tragedy of your heart, Julian," Clara interrupted smoothly, stepping up beside her husband's chair with unshakable pride. "You only treat people with respect when you think they have something you can take from them." Elijah placed his hand gently over Clara's, looking up at Julian without a single trace of bitterness or anger in his eyes. "Julian," Elijah said quietly, his voice carrying the calm authority of a man who had conquered far greater storms than arrogance. "True wealth is not measured by the status of your clothes or the strength of your legs. It is measured by what you are willing to give up for others when nobody is watching." Elijah motioned gently to Arthur Sterling. "Let us move to the terrace, Arthur. The air inside is a bit heavy tonight." As Clara slowly pushed Elijah's wheelchair toward the garden terrace, the crowd stepped back, clearing a wide, respectful path for them. Julian stood alone in the center of the room, completely disgraced, as guests quietly walked away from him. Elijah and Clara stepped out into the crisp autumn night, holding hands under the moonlight. They left behind a room full of noise and arrogance, proving once and for all that true dignity cannot be diminished by cruel words, and love built on sacrifice will always reign supreme.